Welcome to Engaging Truth. I'm your host for today, Matt Popovits, and I'm here with Pastor Dave Schultz and with Bill Pruitt, and they're here from Evangelical Life Ministries, which is the ministry that actually makes this radio show, Engaging Truth, happen. This show is something that they developed years ago, a ministry that they have continued, that has shared the message of Jesus and talked about current and cultural issues for a long time now, and I'm here with them to talk about the future of this radio show and of their ministry, as well as how they got started doing this in the first place. So Dave and Bill, welcome to your own show.
Well, thank you for welcoming us. We feel honored, quite frankly, don't we, Bill?
Thanks. Yeah, very much so. Thanks, Matt, very, very much.
Well, let me just go back a little bit to give you a little bit of an idea of how this all got started. Coming out of St. Louis, where I had spent quite a number of years with managing the Lutheran Hour station, I came back into Houston wanting to believe that that everyone would want our message. Every station would love to put a new message slanted toward our confession, which would be the Lutheran Church, on the air. Nobody wanted us. Nobody.
Go figure.
And we understood that our message was sacramental, and our message was confessional, and our message was of a sort that it was hard for most people who live in this city within the Christian denominational sector didn't agree with where we were.
Yeah. So let me just clarify really quickly for our listeners. When you talk about being in Houston and in Texas, where you could argue it's the buckle of the Bible Belt, heavily influenced by American Baptist theology, which is not sacramental, meaning that they don't have a view of the Lord's Supper that Lutherans do, which is Lutherans believe that Jesus is somehow really present in that meal. Also have a different view of baptism. We baptize all ages. American Baptist view of Christianity believes in something called believer's baptism. And the radio market, not just in Houston, but really in much of America, is dominated by that particular American Baptist theology. So there wasn't really much space for someone like Lutherans who say, we make a big deal about Jesus. We also believe some mysterious things about baptism and Lord's Supper.
Well, I visited all the Christian radio stations in town. I think it was for 10 years. Kept visiting them. We don't want you. I'm sorry. We'll give you 5 minutes on the air, but we'll look at what you're doing so that it's not sacramental or it's not creedal. And I said, okay. So I did get 5 minutes a week for a long time on one of the stations, but they didn't want to give me 20 minutes or 30 minutes. That was too much. So we worked at this until finally a station said one day, but a man who had been a pastor at St. Mark, where you are, he now left the ministerial realm and went into Christian radio, and he said, I think this station would like to take you on, and that's been it since 2007. That's where it all began. And then we began to download the things that came out of St. Louis from the radio station there, and that didn't work because that ended real quick. So we had an hour and a half on our own to do with what we could do in terms of broadcasting, and that meant interviewing people on our own, which I was the only one who had done that, and then do this, taking a critical half hour and letting people call in and say, we don't agree with you, or we disagree with you, or we agree with you. But that's where it all began.
And Bill, tell me how you jumped into this.
I'm a member at St. John and retired from the newspaper business where I've been involved in journalism for over 40 years and was drawn more and more into the administration side of this by pastor, and then got involved doing some on-air work, and then started going to the seminary in Darrington, doing some work there, and then started doing some engineering and some audio and video work for our multimedia offerings, as well as the broadcast, and slowly and surely got immersed up to my neck and beyond now into the work here. And now he persuaded me to become a member of the board of directors at ELM and ended up being chairman this year, and working with David and the rest of the board members here. Our philosophy is primarily to bring applied theology to the radio. Let people know what's ministries are doing out there and how God's grace is manifesting itself through the acts and deeds of the people that we interview. And it's been quite a rewarding effort for me.
Yeah. So over the 12 years, what's been the most satisfying interview that you've ever had? Does one come to mind?
I guess there are many of them because every year someone comes up who just blows the lid off of what has been said about Jesus. And we had another one, a pastor from India not too long ago, just blew the lid off the whole program. Never forget it, because at the end of the program, he said, beside what has happened to me coming out of the Hindu world and becoming a Christian and rejected by my family, I was enabled over the years to bring my family to faith in Christ. And then he said, of all things, of the children that God has given us, all my children were teens, and one night on Christmas Eve, all three of them were with their friends in a different place in India, and the house burned down, and all the children perished with it. And we could almost see him going back into the Hindu community and people saying, see, you see what happens when you become a Christian?
Wow.
But he never gave up. He never flinched.
That's like Job. That's Job.
Exactly.
Job, the Bible character who loses everything yet doesn't lose faith. Wow.
We have guests like this all the time.
Wow.
And this is exciting for us, isn't it, Bill?
It is.
Because of the fact that these people are real children of the Heavenly Father, born in the blood of Christ. And their stories are sometimes hilarious, sometimes they're tragic, but they're real. And so we have these all the time. And you asked the question, I can't put my finger on one of them because there's been so many of them. But that's why we do what we do, because people love to hear about transforming of the heart. And probably another thing that we do that we both love, and that's going into a prison.
That was the real clincher for me. The first trip to Darrington. There is the Heart of Texas Foundation, headed by Grove Norwood, helped put together with the state of Texas and the TDC a seminary for prisoners at Darrington, the Darrington unit down in Rocheron, Texas, where people who are generally life sentenced people are accepted into the seminary. They have to have 10 years left on their sentence when they get done, and they get a full 4-year Bible college education, and then are sent out 2 by 2 to other prisons around the state of Texas to minister to other prisoners. And to hear the tales and the testimony of the people that have gone through this program is just absolutely incredible. The transformation that Jesus has made in the lives of these men who were without hope is stunning. And every time we go back there, on the way back, when we drive back up to Houston, we sit in silence for about the first 25 minutes and then start reflecting on the stories we've heard. And it's just amazing what is going on inside the walls of these prisons here in Texas.
That's incredible. You talk about the impact that the gospel's had in a place like Darrington Seminary, in the prison there. What about the impact of this show in the hearts and minds of listeners? Has there been any feedback that you've received over the years that's really resonated with you?
We receive feedback from an analytic that's done every week. At first, when we first were receiving information back, we were hearing from all over the world. Simply people not listening to our program and responding to it, but hearing the program and responding to our website. So we knew they came into the website, and we knew what they were asking, the questions they were asking, and we preordained to do the questions with answers before they came in. That's lessened a little bit now, so we don't do the programming as the Lutheran Hour does, and for the sake of being able to count noses or heads.
Sure.
We do know that the gospel doesn't get out, and with the technology that's available today, to go any place, not only in this country, but in the world with what we do and with what you do. It's just simply amazing. So we have the ability to know who comes back to the website, and we know where they come from, basically, and the questions they ask. But outside of that, we have no contact yet. That may be different in the future.
Yeah, yeah. Well, what do you see is the necessity for programs like this, where, as you said, Bill, you are telling the stories of applied theology, and basically the gospel in action, doing what the gospel does, forgiving people of their sins, motivating them in acts of love and charity and mercy. Why is it necessary right now to still tell these stories?
I think people are swayed and being pulled away from it. The most important place in a community 50 years ago was the church door, in a lot of cases, and now that's not the case. People are not rooted to church as the center of society the way they once were, and people are becoming more and more self-oriented and more secular and less clerical in their lives, and the place of religion is being supplanted by so many other things. We become garage door communities, where basically people drive up to their garage doors, open them, drive their car in, shut them, and you don't see them for the rest. The people don't neighbor anymore. They're just they're locked within themselves. And the more examples we can give of how Christ is changing lives and working in the community to make people's lives better and to make the world a better place, despite the work of the ruler of the world, if you will, Satan. It's just amazing to hear those stories and let people know that there is hope for people who find themselves in situations where they feel hopeless.
What about the future of this program? What do you hope for this program and these conversations on engaging truth in the years to come?
It's probably going to change dramatically. Simply, technology is changing, and how the word gets out and the way in which it helps us to promote Jesus in the way that people's ears will receive that message. We can't even predict that. But the message has always been the same. The commission has been go and tell. The message has always been the same, and that's Jesus. And just go.
Yeah.
And so that's exactly what we do. And what's going to change for us is how this message gets out and where it goes. That will make a difference in terms of what we do in terms of the broadcast. But the message is the same. You preach it, I teach it, Bill talks it. It'll never change. So what we hope to do is expand this ministry to the point where it can go everywhere, and using technology to make it happen. I've got a friend of mine who does a show from Dixon every week, and he broadcasts back to Iran, and he speaks in Farsi.
Wow.
And he does an hour a week back to Iran, and he gets 1,500 confessions of faith per month from that program.
Wow. That's incredible.
It is incredible, but that's what the word does. But he's using technology to make it happen. So, Bill, comment on that.
I'd like to see us make our programming more interactive and more conversational. It's one thing for us to sit and talk to or at someone, but to actually make this a situation where people actually feel that they have a relationship with us, and we can do that through social media, I believe. My philosophy on prayer is much like my philosophy on radio and entertainment. It's not an event; it's a dialogue, and so we'd like to make that more of an interactive and relational experience with our listeners. And I think multimedia is certainly going to be a way to do that.
Yeah, yeah.
And then we also have a group that takes apart some of these messages into 2 and 3 minute snippets and puts them on social media.
Sure.
And if someone is brought to faith in Christ or asks for prayer requests or comments, that's the best we can get at this particular point.
Yeah.
because we're not counting heads, we're not counting noses. We just know that the gospel needs to get out, and we're one of the little organizations, as you are, to make it happen.
Yeah. So what do you say to someone who's listening who wants to learn more about what ELM has been about in years gone by, and who maybe wants to, in some way, shape, or form, support, encourage, pray for this ministry and this radio show and everything else this ministry wants to do in the years coming up?
Well, we have a website, elmhouston.org, and we encourage people to come out and see our story. And we have archived broadcasts. We have both video and audio content that people can acquire. We've also got a Facebook presence. We've also got a Twitter feed, so you can follow us. And we'd like to have people go back and hear our story. And there is a place there if they wish to donate. They can donate to ELM as well. So we are always willing to accept donations for people who are willing to support our ministry and what we're doing.
Much of what we do is simply volunteerism. In other words, from the very beginning, we have stressed the simple fact that we don't pay anyone to do anything. We are forced sometimes to use technical help to help us to do things that we cannot do voluntarily. But otherwise, everything is done voluntarily. Every simple nickel and dime and quarter goes right into the distribution of programming, however that's done. And we do it in various ways, and we have people to help us do it in various ways. But thanks be to God for the technology. And you know, and I know, with as quickly as it's changed in the last 5 years, from 5 years from now, what we're doing today won't be recognized as being normal anymore.
Well, it'll be fundamentally different. The one thing that will stay the same, though, is, as you've already said, is the need to tell the story of Jesus and to highlight how he is still doing his thing in and through his church and in this world today. So on that note, we've only got a couple of minutes left. I want to get a story out of each one of you, a brief story, but a story nonetheless. So I'll ask each of you the same question. Okay. David, I'll start with you. When you were 9 years old, who was the most spiritually impactful person in your life, and what did this person do that drew you just a little bit closer to Jesus?
As a little boy, my parents prayed that I would be the one of the two boys in the family that would go into ministry. And I had an issue that I was ashamed of because I couldn't talk very well. I had a speech impediment.
Really?
Yes. It wasn't serious, but it frightened me because I kept thinking to myself, if I want to follow my dad, or if my mom is praying that I follow my dad into ministry, then I should be able to talk. Well, maybe I'll just write one day. I didn't know. Followed me all the way through high school, all the way through college, into the seminary. And the first preaching engagement that I had in seminary was an invitation from my grandfather's church in Milwaukee. And the pastor said, I want you to come and do your first sermons here at this church, scared to death. And I just laid it down before the Lord and said, I don't know if this is what you want me to do, but I don't speak very well, but I'll do the best I can. And if you want me here, I'll be here. And so that morning, I used to practice with rocks in my mouth, like Sosthenes.
Really?
Oh, yeah. I used to put rocks in my mouth and speak through rocks.
And that helps?
Well, it probably did to a certain point. But finally the day came where I had to preach, and I did. And the moment I stepped in the pulpit, the Lord took it away.
Wow.
Never been the same since. And you can't tell that I ever had a speech impediment. People who are deaf can, because I articulate differently than a lot of people do. But
wow,
it's gone. Never been back. Bill,
that's incredible. That's incredible.
Yeah,
wow,
pretty amazing stuff.
That's just a miraculous healing, so that you would be equipped to do the work that God wants you to do.
57 years later, I can still do it.
Wow, that's incredible. Incredible.
That's amazing.
Bill, same question to you. 9 years old. Who was the most spiritually impactful person? What did they do?
My parents, they were both people of deep faith who had been scarred by the politics of church, if you will. Well, they had, and they had basically they became unchurched people, but they wanted to make sure that their children had a deep and strong faith, and so they allowed us, essentially, they encouraged us to go to a church somewhere. But they didn't. I was about 9 or 10 years old, we were sent to church but not taken. And his father had been a pastor, his grandfather had been a pastor, my mother's grandfather had been a pastor, but they sort of practiced a deep and wonderful faith in the home, but not in a full religious setting. So not until I got married and was, in fact, married in the Anglican Church. After my dad was a Baptist, my mom was Church of Christ. We had been Methodists or gone to Methodist churches when we were kids. I was baptized in a Lutheran church, but by the time I got to became married and had our first child, then I got drawn back to church because I felt like I wanted to give my children a legacy that I had not necessarily had, organized religion. And so when I went back into the Lutheran Church and was really drawn back into it by my children, and have gotten more and more involved to the point where I'm, here nearly every day now with with everything that goes on around us. So it's been a miraculous sort of return to the church.
In both of your cases, in both stories, quite a complete change that God brings about. Dave, God heals you so that He can use you. Bill, God raises you in a home, gives you faith, but you're disconnected from any kind of vibrant life in the local church, and then now you are a part of the vibrant life of a local church. Just goes to show you never know what God has planned for your life, right?
You can't ever doubt that, no matter where you are or what you're doing. You just lay your hands before the Lord and say, I don't have a clue about what I'm doing, and I bring nothing to the table. And you have done it all. Now, what do you want to do with me? Yeah.
Well, it just goes to show that, God is not only the most forgiving force in the universe, but the most creative as well. We've got just a couple minutes left in our show today, guys. As the men who pioneered this radio show and this ministry that has been bringing the gospel to folks for well over 10 years now, what would you like the lasting impression of Engaging Truth Radio to be long after it's gone? Let's say it lasts for another 100 years, but when it's finally put to bed, what do you want the legacy and impact of this place to be?
Just that people cared enough to not only support the proclamation of the gospel using the technology of the day, but that people's lives were changed. That's enough. Yeah. And I think that's where we stand.
I'd love to have someone say, I heard the message of grace for the first time through ELM.
Awesome. And with that, guys, we will wind things down. Again, if you want more information on Engaging Truth or Evangelical Life Ministries, you can head to our website, elmhouston.org. You can visit archived episodes there. You can also find Evangelical Life Ministries on Facebook. And also you can just Google Engaging Truth Radio Show. You'll find us. You'll find episodes. We'd love to have you listen, and we'd love to have you support us. Until next time on Engaging Truth.